Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video. Today I've got a pretty cool knife for you. This is the Curtis F3. I have done one other video on this, and I've actually mentioned it in a video before that, and that is when I got this knife I did a first impressions video and I entitled it Grail Knife, because for me this really is a Grail knife. I did mention it in a video before that, and you may want to look this one up because it's a pretty fun video called Admired from Afar, and that is a video where I talked about knives that I like and that I am interested in, but I just have kind of resigned myself to the fact that I'll probably never own one. This was in that category, but fortunately for me and for many others, I'm sure, Dave has this program, this ongoing program where he does a knife of the day. And so he'll put something up on his website, you know, it's a different one every so often, and it will be on sale. Now, I've clicked on those sale links before and they've been sold out. So I was pretty happy the day that I saw this one go up and, you know, followed the link and sure enough was able to get this. So that's pretty cool. And I'm really, really happy to be able to have one. And I have been thoroughly enjoying carrying and using this knife. Let me say one difference about this that is a little different from most of the knives in my collection is that this is a full custom knife. That is, every component here, every piece, scales, you know, blade, everything is made by Dave himself. And that's because of two things. Number one, he's a skilled craftsman and an engineer, but also he has an extensive machine shop. In fact, I think he owns a water jet business, so is able to do all of those kind of machining tasks in-house, which is pretty cool. Now, having gotten the introduction out of the way, let's go ahead and start into some of the components of this knife and what I think about it, beginning with, of course, size and weight, the way that we always do. So this knife is 7 3/4 inches overall. All right, the blade length here is 3 1/4 inches and the handle is 4 1/2 inches. Now, this is I don't know how long ago this was done, but this is a bit different. The medium F3s used to be, you know, 8 1/4 inches or something like that. And at some point the decision was made to shrink them down a little bit, you know, sort of much to my dismay. As you guys know, I like larger knives. However, this one, whether it's because of the way the handle is or because of the finger choil, I find it actually quite nice, quite usable, and the size on this one doesn't bother me, and that has not been typical for me normally. And I've tried lots of smaller knives. I've tried Delicas and Dominoes and a bunch of others. I've had a 943. And I've even tried the 940, although I've never bought one, but I have gotten to play with one pretty extensively, and they're all just too small for me. So the fact that this knife is not, I think probably comes from the fact that it's pretty hand-filling, and you do have that option to choke up and kind of modify that grip a little bit. But yeah, so that size is not what I'm used to, and that size is a slight change from the way these were initially, or at some point in time. Thickness on this, by the way, since we're still talking about size, this knife is 9/16 thick, so just a little more than 1/2 inch, and it is a pretty hefty little folder. Okay, so yeah, it's a small knife, but it does weigh in at 5.9 ounces, which is pretty heavy for a knife of this size and this blade length. However, if I flip the knife on its back for you, or on its front for you, you can see the back spacer there, the full titanium slabs, and the blade stock at 160 thousandths. So it's actually a pretty stocky little knife, and because of that, the thickness and the heft of those components, that's where all of that weight is coming from. All right, so let's go ahead now and start with looking at the blade and sort of work our way through the way that we normally do. So this blade is CTS XHP, very, very good steel. And of course, this is very well heat treated. And I have found this to be quite a bit harder. I haven't done a full-on sharpening on it. It just hasn't needed it, but I have honed it and stropped it, and you know, the performance that's coming from this is considerably better than a lot of CTS XHP blades that I've had, especially Spyderco, or I mean, not Spyderco, I'm sorry, especially Cold Steel, who tends to run their CTS XHP a little softer And that is, you know, because they're trying to accommodate to an end user who may not be very good at sharpening. So the shape on this blade is a spanto grind, and it's hollow ground all through here, the main bevel, and then as it goes up to the sort of tanto portion at the end, it's flat ground, and that does add quite a bit of thickness to that tip, making it very strong, very robust. And what's really, really great about this blade is that it's a really, really hard use, confidence inspiring blade, but it's also a blade that cuts really, really well. And so oftentimes you'll hear me talk about striking a balance between being really hard use and still being a good performing, you know, cutting tool. Well, I wouldn't even use the word balance in this case. This just really pulls off both really well, and I don't feel like I'm making any compromises with this blade. Even though it is very heavy and very stocky, it still cuts really, really nicely. Everything from, you know, onions or apples or cheese to, you know, to wood or opening packages or breaking through hard plastic clamshell packages. It just does all of those things really, really well. So I've got to say that I am definitely a big, big fan of this particular blade shape. Obviously, there is a Wharncliffe style for this if you're not familiar with Curtis knives, and that having the slightly, you know, a fuller hollow grind would also be a pretty effective blade shape, I would imagine. And I might someday have an opportunity, or if I have an opportunity, like to check one of those out, as I would also like to check out the larger version of this. The finish on this is a really nice stonewash, and it's a stonewash that is done in such a way that, you know, you can still see it's got some reflectivity to it. It still looks like a knife blade. It hasn't been so heavily stonewashed that it sort of washes out the shininess from the steel, and I don't really like that. This is, you know, a nice stonewash where you still get that contrast between the handle and the blade, and it pulls off a really nice look. Obviously, you got a nice drop point there, and lots of area for your thumb when you do choke up on this knife. So again, that's a nice feature of the blade. So yeah, great blade. Very, very effective. I will say the shorter blade does impact me from time to time. Earlier today, I went to cut up some apples to give my boys some apple slices. And this knife, you know, you've only got this much cutting edge, and it wouldn't quite reach across that whole apple. I had to kind of do some finagling to get the whole apple cut through. And those are the kinds of things that bother me about a shorter blade. So I still do get that from time to time. Let's keep going now with lockup and deployment. And I gotta tell you, this knife does really, really well in that department. Okay, it is a ceramic ball bearing pivot, and it's a cage ceramic bearing with a ceramic detent ball as well. So that means it slides nicely on the steel. And the geometry on this flipper is really, really well done. So whether you're a push button guy or whether you're a light switch guy, the knife just works. Furthermore, I will say I like the fact that it was well thought out. So if you want a push button, you can actually see that there's a nice little flat tab there on the flipper, specifically angled in the way that you want to apply pressure to push button that out, and it really, really flies out. Same is true when you go to light switch. The little cutout that matches the curve down here of the choil really serves as a nice spot to get your finger in there and do a light switch motion as well. So both deployment methods, and it is a flipper only, but whether you're a light switch guy or a button press guy, this is going to work really, really nicely for you. The lock is, let me show you here. You can see the lock bar insert there. A pretty cool thing about this lock bar insert is that it is D2 steel. So it's not just like, you know, the cheapest stainless that someone could find. You know, D2, if you're familiar at all, is a really good blade steel. It's hard and durable, and in fact, very similar in performance to the CTX XHP blade steel. So you've got two steels that are going to match up nicely, and you're not going to get undue wear on either the blade tang or the lock face because of a differentiation in hardness between those two. The stop pin on here is internal, so you can see if I show you the back of the knife, no stop pin to be found anywhere. and that's because the stop pin is, you know, sort of right inside of here, and there'll be a track in the blade to allow for that, so that you end up getting, obviously, getting the knife working the way that it should. I was going to say you'll have to take my word for it, but you really won't have to, because the blade is stopping, so you know there's a stop pin. Okay. Anyway, let's keep going now. Lockup and deployment, very, very impressive. Very, very smooth. If this knife drops shut really nicely, and the overall action on it is really, really well done. If you're now, oh yeah, I forgot to say this, and it's in my notes. The lock bar tension is very good, and there's a nice little cutout there to allow your fingers to get in and actuate that lock pretty easily. So if you're one of those guys who likes to fiddle with your knife a lot, you won't be disappointed by this knife. It deploys, quickly and effectively, but it's also pretty easy to unlock and pretty easy to play with, and it's not going to eat up your fingers like some knives are kind of known to do. Let's see. Oh yeah, one last thing about the over travel, or about the decorative pivot here. You've got this big decorative pivot, which I really think looks very, very cool, but also it's there serving as the over travel stop. So you can see how the lock bar here is behind that circle, so that that's keeping the lock bar from being overextended. Now, let's move on to the handle. Fairly simple construction here. You've got the two titanium slabs, backspacer here that has nice jimping on it, Torx bit construction. The titanium is not milled out in any way, and that's something that does contribute to that weight. I don't know how I feel about that, whether I'd want it to be milled out or not. I kind of generally like that. So sure, Dave, if you're watching this and you ever feel like making a change or adding a step in your process there, some milled out pockets from those scales to lighten the knife up a bit would be appreciated. Very nice titanium stonewash finish here, and it's very, very comfortable in hand. Now I should say this at this point, this is a custom knife. So if you go on Dave's website, you can see dozens of variations of this, every color anodizing, different inlays of different materials. So there's tons and tons of options that are available. Those do add significant costs. So mine was going to stay with the plain titanium, but it is very nice looking and really comfortable in hand. I do like the finger choil option when it comes to ergonomics. The jimping as well is really, really well executed. It really is done so that it locks your finger in and gives you a lot of confidence in hand while not tearing your skin apart. And the same is done with the jimping on the back of the knife here. That does work really nicely in reverse grip. Okay. How is it for comfort? Yeah, very, very good. I'm quite happy with that. I will make one little complaint here, and that is about this front cutout. If it was about 1/8 of an inch longer, so about to where my finger is now, it would be just a teeny bit more accommodating for my particular hand. And I have pretty average size hands. I need a size large glove. A medium is too small, and a large is just a little bit too big. So I would call my hands pretty average sized. And it would be nice to see just a little extra right about to there in this front choil that's cut out here. I will say that in use, as I've done, and I've done lots of cutting with this knife, I've never actually thought to myself I'm uncomfortable, or I've never felt a hot spot or developed any kind of callus or redness or anything like that from using it. But it's just sort of a minor thing that could be improved in my mind. Lanyard hole back here is very small, so you might be able to get some stripped out paracord through there, but I don't know. Someone maybe let me know if you've got a paracord on yours, how you'd pulled that off. And the clip is a single position clip, and it does carry over the crosshair pattern that Dave likes to do on these knives, and I really like that pattern. It's a nice little design touch. Now here again is something that where a knife of this size, it's fairly short, It would be nice to see this as a deep carry clip, you know, almost leave this exactly as it is, but just bend this tab down instead of up, and that would be a nice touch as well. So a couple little things there that I could see improving. Now I will say, for me, I would not want to go and change that lanyard hole. Being nice and small the way it is something I appreciate because I don't use a lanyard. So a big hole in my knife doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So there you go. That's sort of a rundown of the main features, of the things I like and the things that maybe are maybe not entirely perfect to me. I do want to bring in some comparisons. I've got a fair number of comparisons, some here that are, you know, similar in size and roll, I think, and then a few others that are maybe knives that some of you who are watching might appreciate a little more, especially if you like the larger knives. So first up is a much more affordable knife, but still pretty cool and fairly premium. This is the Lion Steel Kerr, and I find these knives really remind me a lot of each other. They're sort of both short, fat knives with pretty thick blade stock, but that still perform really, really well. So Lion Steel Kerr obviously is much, much cheaper than the Curtis, but it's just a regular production knife with G10. But you know, if you're looking for something in this size and this weight and you like the short stocky knives, that would be a pretty good option for you. This knife is often compared with the Hinder XM18, and I can see why. You know, both of these knives are designed to be sort of a little overbuilt, right? They're heavier built with bigger, thicker components than other knives in their sort of price range or in than their competitors, and that's because they're trying to be really thick, heavy-duty knives. And of course, this is the fatty, so it's an even more exaggerated, you know, overbuilt knife. By the way, I find that Hinders, what I really like about Hinders is they're designed to be overbuilt, but they still function really, really nicely. Another knife that I would put in sort of this size category is the Wayfarer 247. You can see it's a little bit bigger. The blade is a little bit longer. But yeah, definitely very high-end, very, very well put together. And if you're looking for sort of a high-end flipper design, this guy is definitely going to fit the bill as well. And give you that, what would you say, that high-end, high-quality feel that you may be looking for. Let's see, when it comes to titanium frame lock flippers, there is the Custom Knife Factory Morph 4. Let's flip it over so you can see the lock side as well. Again, a little bigger knife, and you guys know I generally prefer slightly larger knives, so most of the knives I have to compare are going to be a little bigger, but again, very well made, pretty high performance. Now I would say this one, you may get some sidelong glances if you start using this one in public. It looks pretty tactical or pretty weaponish. Where the Curtis, I think you'd be pretty safe. Most people aren't going to have too many issues with that. Let's bring in the ZT. Now, obviously, one knife that really kind of would remind me of this a little bit is the Sienkiewicz design. All of a sudden, the model number has gone from my mind. But there are a couple of ZTs. The 0920, I think, is sort of similar to this. 0562 would be a similar size. This is obviously much bigger, but there would be some zero tolerances that I would say would compare pretty nicely to this. There's a short, fat Sienkiewicz, and if someone wants to comment below with what model that is, since I don't seem to be able to remember it right now, that would be helpful. But it puts me in mind of this knife as well. And actually, owning this knife has made me think maybe I'd like to check the other one out. When it comes to high quality titanium frame lock flippers, hard to talk about those without bringing up the Riat Knives Torrent. This is really, really a great knife, very, very good quality. And not obviously this is a production knife. It's not a custom, but it is very, very high quality, very high end, and will certainly fill that desire for a really nice knife for some person. One more comparison, and this is, to sort of be in contrast with the Curtis. This, of course, is the Cold Steel 4 Max. But I brought this in because these two actually share something in common. That is, they're both extremely, sort of overbuilt, big, heavy-duty, hard-use knives, but both of them are very usable as cutting tools, which is something that I really appreciate. So there's some comparisons for you. Overall, let me say that this knife is really, really well put together. It's designed and built to be used, and Dave Curtis has done a great job really nailing that. He's created a knife here that inspires a lot of confidence that anyone is going to feel very comfortable using for all kinds of cutting tasks. And it's going to perform those tasks really, really well, which is, what you want if you're spending this kind of money on a knife. Yeah, it does slightly favor the sort of hard use or tactical end of the spectrum, more so than maybe the gentleman's folder end of the spectrum, but it's still a pretty versatile blade. And I could see this serving anyone well as their sort of primary EDC knife, where they're going to buy this and for the rest of their lives, this is the only knife they're going to have. I think it would fit just fine in that role. I will say this, and this is something I always appreciate. This is definitely a well-built, maybe even overbuilt knife that doesn't ask you to compromise on, carryability or usability. Yeah, it's a little heavy, but certainly not beyond what I'm willing to carry at all. Although, I say that as someone who owns a Cold Steel 4MAX. But yeah, very, very well put together. Everything just works the way you want it to. And, there's a lot of pride of ownership here and a lot of confidence that comes from a knife that's this well put together. So yeah, when it comes to high-end, hard-use knives, this one is definitely on the short list of the very best that are available out there. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will talk to you soon. Oh, by the way, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. We'll see you later.